Okay, thank you very much, Beverly and Justine, and welcome to all the members. I'm going to share my screen with you and uh, start the presentation. So there we go. So hopefully you're all seeing the slide titled Made in Victoria Manufacturing Growth Programs. So today I'm here and pleased to offer you some information about the Made in Victoria grant programs that are currently available. And I'll cover what's involved with those grant programs, and we can talk a little bit about how does grant application work throughout that discussion. Just before I get into that, I'd like to spend a moment just providing some background about myself. So GrantHelper is the business that I operate, and basically our core mandate is to help other businesses win government grants. So we've been doing this on and off with other service options over the last decade, but since COVID, we pivoted the business to fully concentrate on grants, and so grants are the sort of main focus now. Throughout the decade of experience, I've helped businesses of all different sizes with small grants and quite large grants. There's a lot of information on the website regarding client success stories, insights about how to get grants and so on. So if anyone's interested, you just pop over to granthelper.com.au and you can pick up some insights from there. The process that we deliver is an end-to-end service covering helping review the guidelines, checking your eligibility. If you decide to engage us for assistance, we provide and produce a submission planner, which is like a project planner in terms of the grant submission. We produce all the materials. Some stuff needs to come from clients. We draft everything up. We work together to refine it. We basically do it through a series of workshops. Depending on where you're located, we can meet up or we do it online. We collate things, compile a final submission, and then we do all the online portal population and submit it for you as well. So we're basically there as your external resource to do everything in relation to government grant applications. We've worked with quite a few businesses, I'm not sure exactly how many, but in the time frame, we've amassed over $30 million in grants. And the grants are competitive grants. They're not R&D tax incentive or EMDG. So they're a little bit different. And each one has its own uniqueness. There's a few companies listed there that I've helped in the time. So that's a little bit about me. What we'll now do is move on to talk about the Made in Victoria programs that we're here to investigate today. And just a reminder, if anyone has any questions as we're going along, feel free to interrupt me. Happy to take questions as we're going through the presentation. And also we can wait to get to the end as well. So the two programs are the Energy Technologies Manufacturing Program and the Manufacturing Growth Program. So what are they about? The Energy Technologies Manufacturing Program is specifically targeting manufacturers who are involved in producing either components or finished goods that are relative to any kind of energy technology. So it could be, say, you're building or making components for electric buses or electric trains or something like that. Then you're in that supply chain. It could be you're assembling the finished parts that are then on-sold to become a contributing product to transitioning, or decarbonisation or something of that nature. So anything in that kind of space, and supply chain and the end products is relevant. This particular grant is closing on the 13th of December. There's still time to lodge applications if anyone's interested. The other program is the Manufacturing Growth Program. Now, this is the second round of the Manufacturing Growth Program. In the first round, I helped 2 clients who both were successful. This program is sort of generally open to manufacturers who meet certain requirements. And the main thing is that you're investing in capital and creating jobs. And the government is looking to get behind those businesses who can demonstrate an improvement in productivity, a creation of new jobs, based on the investment that they're proposing. It is a competitive program, and not everyone gets supported, so it does require a bit of a crafted approach with some strategy. There's a need to understand what is the program really aiming to achieve, so it's important. Sometimes it helps to work with a consultant, so that you can get a bit deeper and enhance your chances of success, and that's what we do. So moving on and looking at each program. First of all, let's look at the Energy Technologies Manufacturing Program objectives and outcomes. So this program is specifically focused on increasing zero and low emission manufacturing capability. So anyone in that supply chain or in that space, the program encourages businesses to adopt and integrate new manufacturing capabilities in either product development or manufacturing in that space around low emissions or transitioning to net zero. The program aims to create new jobs and enhance opportunities for skill development for existing workforces, and again, for those manufacturers operating in that zero or low emission technology space. The program outcomes are to produce more components and products in that space, in the net zero and low emission energy technology space, that are made in Victoria, to help manufacturers improve their position in that space through being able to create new and produce new and more advanced components and products with the support of the Victorian government. And the expectation is that the businesses will help the workforces build out their skills and create a more diverse and inclusive manufacturing future for those businesses in Victoria. The Manufacturing Growth Program has some similar objectives and outcomes. There's some slight nuanced differences though. The Manufacturing Growth Program objectives are essentially targeted at expanding a manufacturer's capability and capacity for implementing new manufacturing technologies. So there could be advanced manufacturing equipment or machinery. It could be new systems or processes which are building on existing advanced manufacturing. There's a whole range of activities that could be applicable. It's also designed to improve the productivity and competitiveness in both local and global supply chains. And obviously, creating new jobs, upskilling the workforce is a big aspect of this program as well. And then supporting Victoria's transition in manufacturing to net zero. So any new technologies which are less impactful on the environment will be considered highly. The program outcomes, the program aims to strengthen the Victorian manufacturing sector through the adoption of these new technologies, and creation of new jobs, strengthening the ability to be more productive, be more competitive, operate at a global level, etc. And to develop local or sovereign manufacturing capability and become a more resilient supply chain in Victoria, maybe through onshoring or import replacement, and to enable greater capability for the businesses to capture emerging opportunities within local and global supply chains through implementing and executing those capital investments. And finally, there to support projects which support Victoria's transition to the net zero. So that's where there's a little bit of crossover. So eligibility wise, who and what is required to be eligible for these grants? Obviously, have to be a Victorian-based business, and you have to execute the investment in Victoria. You need to demonstrate a minimum of 3 years trading history, and for the manufacturing growth program, you either need to employ 20 staff or you need to be turning over more than 1.5 million as of the 30th of June 2023. So I believe a lot of the members will be eligible in meeting the requirements. There is also, I failed to mention in that slide, a minimum project requirement in order to be eligible as well. So, for example, in the manufacturing growth program stream, the minimum grant is 50,000. Therefore, the minimum project is 150,000. I think there might be a slide a bit later on about that. So, what activities can be funded? Capital expenditure. So, any kind of investment in manufacturing, machinery, equipment, and technology, processes, systems, etc. It's not just limited to the equipment itself. Other project-related non-capitalized expenditure. So maybe product or process improvements, some R&D that's going on. Maybe bringing a new product to realization, and as part of that, you're putting in some investment in capital, and maybe there's still some work to do on the actual R&D of the products, which lead to the supply chain development. Any minor building alterations, fit out costs, changes to shop floors or installation of mezzanine or, electrical upgrades and those sorts of things, which are allowing and enabling you to then put that new capital into place, are often eligible for partial funding as well. There is an element of training sometimes required, especially with new equipment. Those costs, if they're in addition to the capital expenditure, can also be part of the project. And then any labour and contractors related to the delivery, electrical contractors or labourers, or gas, plumbing, etc., civil works perhaps. These can also be factored into the project costs to increase the total project cost and make sure you get the maximum value from the grant that you can achieve. The grants themselves for the energy technologies manufacturing program, the grants are between 100 and 750,000, and they come on a 1 to 3 basis. All right, so the government's chipping in 100,000. Minimum project there's 400,000. So basically, an applicant is required to contribute 75% of the total project costs. For the manufacturing growth program, it's slightly different. The ratios are a little bit different. The minimum there is $50,000 grant with a 1 to 2 ratio, meaning $150,000 minimum project spend. So 67% co-contribution. So that's the other eligibility criteria that I failed to mention earlier in the other slide, that once you meet all those other criteria, you need to have a project that actually meets the criteria that the program's wanting to support. And of course, that's just a minimum. You can go above. For example, you need a program, you could have $1 million expenditure, for example, which would then entitle you in the manufacturing growth program's case to request the full 250 grant, but still wouldn't allow you to request the full grant for the energy technologies program. It'd be the 250. But if you had maybe a $3 million investment, then you could request the $750,000. So, depending on what sector you're operating in, what's the level of investment, you could be eligible for either program. So that's that. In terms of core focus, for the Made in Victoria programs, they're both focused on adoption of advanced manufacturing technologies and the creation of jobs, and preferably high-skilled jobs. And then in addition to that, creating opportunities for existing workforces to be upskilled or reskilled. They're the three core focuses. There's a few other things like contributing towards net zero outcomes in some way or other, and also developing that sovereign or local manufacturing capability. So the onshoring or import replacement aspect of manufacturing. They're all important. And then building to create this resilience in supply chain development. They're all important factors, and they're all things that it would be rated and evaluated on with any application. And it's difficult to say how one is more important than the other, or how do you, create a case which is more compelling and perhaps potentially ranked higher than other people in the mix or other businesses in the application mix. It's very difficult to say. So the application process itself is a single stage application process. The programs are due slightly apart. Energy technologies, manufacturing programs due on the 13th, and the manufacturing growth programs due on the 19th. You may think that there's plenty of time, but actually after this week, you're starting to sort of push the boundaries in terms of making sure you put a compelling case together. It does require a bit of time, back and forwards, a bit of effort, and it needs time to put that compelling case together. The time the government has allowed for full assessment is 16 weeks. They sometimes come through a little bit earlier, but that's what they tend to allow. The last round, they did take almost 4 months. And then within a short time, you sign a grant agreement with them. You've got 12 months to execute a project. Based on these timeframes, it appears that the earliest project start date would be around May 24. So if you have something that needs to be done sooner and you want to invest quicker, then and you can't wait, then it may not be worthwhile. You cannot bring these timeframes forward. So, but if you've got something that you're thinking of and the timeframes work, and you're thinking, oh, maybe middle of next year is the right timeframe, then this program could be right for you. The application has a few different components. They ask a bunch of questions about your entity. They then ask you to respond to these assessment criteria. Each program has a slightly different assessment criteria. I've listed them there. They have like 1,000 words or 400 words or whatever it is. I haven't put the word count there, but you can see that the themes and the topics that they're delving into there. In both cases, there's capability and your capacity to deliver the project, and demonstrating, your track record of doing stuff in the past, and how that gives them the perception that you can handle doing something like this. Obviously, they want to invest in companies that can show a bit of confidence in that area. Why do you need the government support in the first place? You can't pay for it yourself, or you're running a bit low on cash flow and you want to be de-risked, or there's a whole range of reasons that it could be, but it's relative to the business and Often when I talk to clients, we try to understand what's the client and what's the business need for the government support more than, well, what can we say that helps us get the grant? It's not like that. So, and you can see in this list of assessment criteria how each program has a slightly different focus on, where those themes sit in the rankings. And so, for example, in the Energy Technologies program, the need for government support sits number 4, but in the Manufacturing Growth program sits at top number 1. So, if they're not convinced that you actually need the funds, then you've already sort of started off on the wrong foot. And then you've got, the jobs, talking about the jobs and the skills development, and you can see that ranks pretty equally in both programs. Evidence of market demand. Interestingly, in the Energy Technologies program, that gets a Guernsey, but there's not a mention of that in the Manufacturing Growth Plan. So not really interested in that. And then finally, the ability to deliver projects. So, and then in the Manufacturing Growth Program, they touch on the environmental benefits, contribution to the sector. So there's a bit more in the Manufacturing Growth Program than there is in the Energy Technologies. And then along with answering, these assessment criteria and creating your business case through answering these, you're required to submit a project implementation plan. They give a template, and then there's an option to build out that template and provide extra information. And we often take the opportunity to put additional details in there without convoluting and making things complicated, but just, to clarify things. And then in addition, you're required to provide evidence of your financial capacity, which requires you to attach 3 years of financial reports. So your June 23 financials need to be completed. And then you need to also get quotations and submit quotations. And then there's option to submit letters of support. We often decide what sort of letters of support are required once we understand what the project's about, and we guide you in developing those letters of support. We often draft them, and then they become specific to the project. So there's a bit going on there in that, and that's why you need to have the time frame. And as I said, after this week, the timeframes are getting a bit tighter and becoming more challenging if you want to put a good business case forward. The slide here is about just some information on some of the key terminology that's floating around in this grant program. Advanced technology. What is it? It's about more enabling capabilities and technologies for uplifting your productivity and competitiveness, and being a bit smarter in how you go about your manufacturing. So it could be that you've got some form of equipment or technology that is enabled to collect data. Maybe that data can be accessed from a workstation at a remote location. You're able to see what's going on on the factory floor, for example. That's some of the things. Maybe there's some process-oriented capabilities and technologies, which mean that people or humans can take a step back, and it provides a safer environment. Those sorts of things are also important. Net zero, what is it? Well, it's a term that's floating around in a lot of government discussion and policy. The global goal is to get to net zero by 2050, or 2050, I should say. And so every little thing that we can demonstrate to the government, reduces the greenhouse gas emissions and adds to decarbonisation by a certain percentage, they will scoop up and collect the data and report back to look how good the government is able to enable those changes to take place, and they tally all those things up. So then sovereign manufacturing, what is that? It's about bolstering local supply chains, and where we went through a phase of globalization and supply chain shifted to offshore. Well, there's now a big push to reorient those supply chains and bring them back on shore where possible, and to have that capability locally, which equals to be sovereign. And the government's quite happy to invest in helping manufacturers to restore those manufacturing capabilities to onshore under certain conditions. So, and then resilient supply chain, well, it's helping build that integration, the flexibility, the digitalization, and also enabling those local supply chains to be interconnected at the international and global level, so that the trading out of Victoria can be bolstered and become more recognised as Victorian. In terms of what we do at GrantHelper, when people ask us about their possibilities of getting a grant like this, we do an eligibility check. As part of that, we ask a few pertinent questions about the business to determine if you're wasting your time or not, and just to get a gauge on how aligned are you with the program, and what's the possibility of you putting forward a good case and being competitive. And that forms our strategic evaluation, and we give you a recommendation. And if you're not sort of ticking the boxes, then I'll let you know. And it's maybe not on this round, but on subsequent rounds, it could be that you need to do something to make yourself get up to that level. We have a bunch of resources available at granthelper.com.au. You could jump on there over there and have a look anytime you like. There's a free ebook, which is quite comprehensive. There's some grant insights. There's a whole range of different topics in the insights section. There's some examples of successes we've had, and we do send out a grant alert on a monthly basis, updating subscribers with the latest news on grants, and where there's something which can't wait, we'll send out a notice saying that this has come up in between. We try to keep people connected. We don't charge anything for the information, and we try to help as much as we can people to think about the grant applications without having to pay for that. And so this is the last slide, and if anyone wants more information about me, you can have a look at my LinkedIn profile there at LinkedIn, Steve Dowling, or just do a search for Steve Dowling. Again, the website, lots of information there. And just to reiterate, we are, or I am, a specialist in securing competitive grants, and every engagement is tailored and specific to your situation. We generally provide the end-to-end grant application service, but it can be tailored. Sometimes people just ask me to help them with the write-up if they have the ability to do other things themselves. Our pricing is transparent. There's no surprises. And as I mentioned earlier, currently we've helped businesses achieve over $30 million in grant successes. So that brings us to the end of the presentation. I think I will stop sharing my screen there and hand back to Justine.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for that, Steve. I hope that everyone enjoyed that really concise but comprehensive presentation. I think the key takeaways from my perspective were understanding those key requirements for the grants, and also the definitions contained in those, because I know that they're words that are often said to do with grants and in industry and in manufacturing at the moment. But those definitions are clearly so important to eligibility for the grants and also for your application competitiveness as well. So I'd like to open up the floor to any questions. If you don't have any questions, then by all means, you're free to depart the meeting. But we will have a Q&A session with Stephen now. And if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind just asking you the first one, Stephen, from a SEMMA perspective.
Sure, go ahead.
When you mentioned about like the letters of support, is that something that SEMMA could also contribute to for our members? Like, say, if you're assisting a member with a grant application and you're going through the letters of support portion, is a letter of support from an association like SEMMA valuable as part of that, or does it depend?
Really depends on the context. I think there may be a place where we want to highlight that an entity has a certain statute in the industry, in which case a letter of support from SEMMA could help to validate that. So there could be a place for that. Yeah.
Great. I'm aware that at SEMMA we offer letters of support for awards applications. That's something we do is existing, but it's on very rare occasions we've actually been asked to submit a letter of support for a grant. And yeah, so I was just wondering if that's something that's normal in the industry or would be valuable. But I guess, yeah, it would depend on the application. But that's definitely something SEMMA is used to providing in other cases and can be signed by the CEO to give it a bit more heft. But
I think one place in particular where it could be useful is to provide an opinion outside of the business on the what the entity's doing in the space and how long have they been contributing to the supply chain and so on. And so it adds another lens, from a customer's perspective. Often the letters of support are very valuable to reinforce that there is the demand, or there is the customer out there ready to take up the outputs. So definitely there can be a place for SEMMA in providing a letter of support, in my opinion.
Fantastic, thank you.
You're welcome.
If anybody else has a question, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask Stephen directly, or you can type it out into the chat. We do have a bit of time for questions, but if you're thinking of one, another one that I noted down from the presentation, Stephen, if you don't mind, feedback on grant application outcomes. Is that something that is provided often, or is that not really a thing?
Feedback is generally provided upon request. Sometimes they will give you a bit of an overview in the letter of rejection, and then you can seek further clarification. It really depends on the program managers, but in the last round, I understand that the feedback was a bit general, and it was very difficult to get specifics. So it can be difficult to really understand why your application was rejected. And they tend to generalize and say, oh, you didn't rank highly in certain aspects of the application against the competitive field. They might identify what that element was, such as contributing to net zero, for example, and then it sort of leaves you a little bit blinded and asking yourself, well, what could we have done further to contribute and bolster the case and make it any better? You don't get that sort of detail, so it is quite general, and it's often very, very difficult to get to the bottom of what is the real story behind why you didn't get chosen. I see there's a question from Peter. What's the cost of a grant submission help? Well, Peter, you could we could have a private conversation about that. There is a cost, and it's a percentage of the grant. That's how I operate, and then there's an upfront portion, which is to cover the preparation, and then there's the success portion. So I carry some of the risk. You don't pay everything up front, and then you get nothing. If you don't get awarded, you feel like you've been, not got any benefit. Yeah, it's split like that. And if you want to know the details about that, then you could, give me a call or jump on the website and lodge an inquiry through there, and I'll be happy to talk to you further at a very specific level. I don't give prices until I know whether you've actually got a project as well that is eligible and suitable. So we need to have that discussion. Yeah.
Stephen, with regards to the
Ashley, is it? Yeah.
Sorry. With regards to the letters of support,
Yeah.
understanding that SEMMA might be able to contribute,
Mm.
can you give any other examples of letters of support and what they have done to assist the grant?
Yeah, sure. One of the key letters of support might be that you're able to, through the letter of support, demonstrate that you have demand for whatever it is that the new equipment is going to contribute to. So, for example, let's say working in the energy space, and maybe you're a component manufacturer and you're supplying to someone who's producing some electric vehicles, for example, trucks, trains, buses, and they value your inputs as part of their assembly process. Then the letter of support could be designed to demonstrate how valuable you are in that end process. And then the letter of support can be tailored to articulate that and show how important that is, and then along with that, how important and what contribution that makes to the business being able to meet supply of the end components into the marketplace. So you draw that connection, and by doing so, you then demonstrate your position within the supply chain, and then how that builds resilience within that supply chain. So there is a bit of a trick to writing a letter of support. There's a structure that I've played with and developed over time. There's some key components that come together to make up a letter of support to produce a good letter of support that is valuable. They're more valuable and contribute better to the business case than someone just saying, well, they've got a good product and we think you should support them. That doesn't mean anything. So you do need to put a bit of thought behind the letter of support. I hope that gives you a bit more guidance.
Yeah, I'm trying to actually work out who I would approach for a letter of support in my application, and I have made a submission to you to speak to you offline and
okay, great.
discuss it further.
Yeah, let's definitely have that discussion. I'm sure we could find something.
I had another question.
Sure.
With regards to evidence of co-contribution, does the government have a preferred or a prioritized way it likes to see the co-contribution?
No, it can vary. So if you've got cash, you can show your bank balance. You might have retained earnings that put away somewhere for this kind of activity, or you may have a combination of cash and finance, equipment finance, bank finance. Or you may have applied for it. You may have a history of being able to get finance in the past, and therefore a letter from a broker or a bank manager saying that you're, in the process. It can be a mixture. Some of the contribution could be coming from cash flow, for example, but then you need to demonstrate the cash flow is actually there. So any of those kinds of things produced and attached to the application will give the government confidence that you're not just saying it, but you're actually producing the evidence to back it up.
Okay. Another question. One of the basically, I'm looking at a piece of machinery that I'm looking to get some grant support around. How many quotes are enough for satisfying the government grant requirements?
Yeah, good question. There's no set number. However, to improve the chances, if you have multiple quotes, and then you can say, look, we've received quotes from 2 or 3. Don't need to go any more than 3. 3 is probably the max. 2 is good. 1's okay. And then, you might do a little table in the project plan that demonstrates a question about how you've evaluated those vendors against your requirements and why you've chosen a certain vendor. It's particularly helpful when the cost is higher than others. So, the government also will have a sense of what costs are applicable. And if you're putting in for something and then they see that, well, maybe this is, way above what is the general acceptance level for investment in this area, you could then address that by, having this evaluation table in the project plan of why you chose the more expensive supplier. That works very well. And in the case of, did someone put in 2 quotes versus 3 quotes versus 1 quote? Well, that's only an element. They may not evaluate on that. It might just help you if there's, a ranking sort of where and we don't know what the ranking is, where you're ranking sort of on par with somebody else. Maybe that gives you an extra rung in your belt. And for the extra effort required, it's not a lot. But yeah, it may help.
Okay. That's useful because I was actually looking at in all the work I've done, looking at the different I guess options for machinery that I'm pursuing. There is actually really only one that meets all the criteria that I need met and gives me the amount of scope that I need. But I felt compelled to put quotations in for the other machines just for the sake of proving the one that I want actually is right. So I figured other quotations were going to be needed just because one wouldn't be acceptable. But no, if there's argument around that one, then that's helpful.
Yeah. Like I said, no stipulation. However, to demonstrate why you've made a choice, that can be a very useful way. And summarizing it in a table format in a project plan is often a good way, rather than just, adding extra information that these assessors have to go through, because you want to make it easy for the assessors to understand your choices and the direction you're going with your projects. And so avoiding too much information and convoluting the story is also important.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Does the particular item you're pursuing need to be delivered inside the 12 months, or just the project started inside the 12 months?
So the implementation execution of the project needs to be delivered within the 12 months. As far as the outputs go, that's not necessary. It's the capital investment and delivering on the jobs, and that are the 2 key things.
Okay. I think that's all I had to mind for now.
Yeah, some good questions there, actually. Look forward to talking to you further outside the webinar. Thank you for those questions. Does anybody else have any questions that they would like to throw out there?
Just further to what he was talking about regarding the letters of support, just as like a bit of context, in the few cases that SEMMA has provided a letter of support towards a grant. In the most recent case that we did, our letter of support was it was for a university who was applying for funding for a program, mental health program. And they had letters of support that were obviously, attesting to the benefit and the relevance of the program. But what SEMMA contributed from our perspective was that we were going to be a channel for delivery for the program. So we added just a different voice to that application, saying that, we have access to manufacturers. This is a manufacturing specific program. We will help deliver it through the following channels. So we were able to show that we had a way of getting it out there, not just, oh yeah, this is a great program and you should fund it. So there's I think a couple of different ways that you can contribute to the relevancy of an application.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Beverly. And that you're you're validating the partnerships and the collaboration that's going on, and how that plays an important role in the overall project outcome and delivery. So that's a really good point. Yeah.
Thanks, Stephen, and thanks, Ashley, as well for your great questions also.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions from the group? Stephen's obviously got a wealth of knowledge, so even if you have a specific situation that's very unique to your company, more than happy to hear it. Your questions benefit the room as well, so feel free to unmute or type in the chat. But just in the meantime, while people are considering, I have another question. The two grants that you've covered today, Stephen, what would you say is the level of difficulty in application for these grants? Because I'm aware that there are different levels. Some people are able to self-apply for certain grants, although I believe they're usually for smaller amounts. But in this case, I'm assuming there's a level of difficulty involved by the fact that they probably require a grant writer's assistance.
Yeah, look, the level of difficulty is an interesting one. The grants require a focus on answering the questions. Now, when you weigh up doing it yourself versus getting outside resources to assist you, one thing you can guarantee when you engage, at least me, I can't speak for other grant consultants, is that you will get a comprehensive message across, and there will be no bullet points left unaddressed. However, when you do it yourself, there's a high chance that you would not address all the bullet points. I've seen many write-ups from people who contact me and say, look, I want you to review my write-up. And when I've done it, I always go back and say, look, you haven't addressed the question that they're asking this way. The questions have multiple questions within a question, and often they're missed. And so one of the skills of a good grant writer that I've learnt is to sort of break down the question, and even to the point where you stick it in a Word document and you slice and dice it and you make it into, this one question becomes these bullet points, and then you start talking about addressing each of those bullet points, and then you can put it all back together into one sort of response. And putting that response back together in a way that actually makes sense is also another challenge. And then, that can be done in different ways. One way that I find really helpful for the audience, the assessor audience, is to actually put little headings and then write a bit about what that heading might be, asking about, and then multiple sort of themes in it. Then each of those hands, the assessor is going to be looking for that. That's often the biggest shortfall when you do it yourself, is you don't, not 100% sure that you're going to address the questions every time to the fullest that they're looking for. So the level of complexity in that area differs. There's also the attachments, producing good letters of support. Since we had a bit of a chat about that, there's a level of thoroughness and comprehensiveness that goes into devising those letters. Well, like I said, you just don't want something that says, well, these folks are good and we think you should support them because they're good. You've got to have a good sort of substantiation around that, and then how does that connect with the goals of the program? You make those connections, and then that adds value, and then that bolsters it. And then from the assessor's point of view, they can see the relevance and importance that you play in the goals and objectives that the program has, not just you as a company. They want to contribute to the government's goals and objectives and support businesses that contribute to that. So making that connection with the program goals and objectives is really important throughout the grant application. When you make statements about certain things that you can achieve, often they're not backed up with correct quantifiable data. And that's another shortfall, that, people make very generalized statements without validating them and providing any. There are 5 free slots to provide additional information, and it's open. You know, if there's some piece of material that contributes to broadening the assessor's understanding and contributes to a comment that's made in one of the assessment criteria, then that's an opportunity to, you know, refer to an extra piece of research or information that, you know, is connected with the grant application. Often people don't make use of that. And so, you know, being able to build out the application where possible, making use of those slots in the application portal and bolstering your case and building that knowledge and disseminating that information to the assessors can also form part of the, you know, making sure you get a better ranking. So yeah, when you talk about complexity, it's very different. Each grant application, sometimes grant applications can be very simple, and they're asking a few questions, and you know, other times they ask a lot of information. These grants are relatively detailed in their questions, and the attachments. So they're kind of leaving it open for people to produce or present additional information to make their case look good.
Stephen,
So hopefully, yeah, go ahead, Ash.
when a while back, there was a national grant for manufacturing.
Modern manufacturing initiative.
Yes. One of the qualifications in that grant was related to the company structure. We couldn't apply for it because we were trading within a trust structure. We had a trading entity as trustee for a trust, and that meant that we were excluded from being able to apply for that grant. It had to be a standalone company. I was considering the same rules to apply for this Victorian grant, but from what I can tell, there hasn't been any reference to that. Are you able to advise whether or not structures matter at all for this grant, and whether there's
so yeah, good question, Ashley. Individuals, partnerships are often an issue. A trust directly, and the reason those three are issues because they're high risk, and the government doesn't want to invest in high risk. But a trustee trading on behalf of a trustee is definitely eligible. There's a lot of businesses out there that are set up that way, and then it comes back to demonstrating your credentials as the trustee, as the trading entity. So and managing that trading entity. So definitely not excluded. And actually surprised that you're excluded from the federal government, because general terms they don't have exclusions on trustees. They only exclude trust. So but we can perhaps delve into that when we have an offline chat.
I've actually just
there's another question in the chat there from Dale. Sorry, go on. Did you want to finish that, Ashley? Or
no, that's fine.
Yeah.
It was
okay.
Fine. Thank you.
All right, no worries. Dale's asked the question. How do you answer the question? Will the project proceed without grant funding impact on grant funding? Interesting. Well, in the 3 minutes I've got left, that's very difficult to say. Look, it has to be relative to the project. So without knowing what your project's trying to do and what you're trying to achieve, I couldn't really advise you on that. But Dale, if you want to have a chat, just drop me a note through the inquiry contact page on the website, and I'll be happy to give you a call, and we can have a chat about your project specifically, and I can give you some specific pointers. So thank you very much for that question. And Ashley, thank you very much for your questions. I'll hand back to Justine and Beverly and